Okay, thank you very much. So what's ECRA? Let's just start right at the beginning. I know some of you have seen me online and on LinkedIn, and I'm very grateful that I have a little following somewhere in the internet out there. But this is about a quality rating accreditation program. Actually, I'm going to go back a slide, because if you look under the title, it says a pathway to excellence. And I think the fact that it's a pathway is probably the most important part of today's session, because I feel that we're always on a journey, and we're on that journey with the children. And it isn't just an inspection. And I feel that it's really important to know that when we're trying to achieve, we all in our centres and our lives have good days and bad days, but what we do about it and how we adapt to it and make it better is that pathway. And I think that's the same thing for early years and childcare and when you're working with those children. So the programme actually covers children from 0 to 8. The reason it goes to 8 is because most of the training, the cash courses, for example, and the degree courses at universities, they actually go up to children age 8. And why? Because we need to know not only where children are starting from. So if you're in a KG school, you still need to know where the 0 to 3 children have come from, their development, their brain development, what's happened to them. And afterwards, we need to know where they're going so that we can sort of make sure that what we're doing with them is preparing them effectively for the next stage. And sometimes I think kindergartens have probably prepared them beyond the next stage, because those children are so incredible. They develop really fast. And sometimes the next stage isn't ready for them. But at least if you're in the early years field, you know that you're doing the best for those children and can get them cognitively, physically, emotionally, and socially ready for wherever they're moving. So that's what I mean by the children's journey and the pathway and why it's 0 to 8. So this is me. I don't like talking about myself. I find it really difficult. But just briefly, my journey to early years, my pathway was after having 3 children very, very close together. 2 planned. The last one surprised me when my daughter was 6 months old, and I thought, oh, I don't like coffee. I wonder why. That was because I was pregnant. So as a result of that, I set up my own business. Should I tell them the name? Yeah. It was called Baby Park. Okay. And that sounds really strange, but I was parking my car with my mum, and I just said, I wish I could just park the children just for half an hour and just have a quiet coffee. So that was the start of my own business, Baby Park. And actually the logo was a parking sign with a pram underneath. So yeah, but since then I've my background is teaching, music, PE as my major. But then I ended up running my own centre and then being quality and compliance manager for 40 centres in the UK. But then, because of my teaching background, I felt that there needed to be a lot more training for management, as well as sort of new staff coming in. So I was very fortunate. I moved into university and headed up the early years teacher status, which was a quality assessment programme for teachers. And it was an absolute privilege. I must have had maybe 2,000 or 3,000 teachers come through that process with my team and myself over those few years. And it's because of that ECRA is as it is now, because ECRA has grown from a quality programme called JODA, which Arabian Child have been facilitating for a number of years. I'll explain why it changed in a minute. But through that process, I realised that all of these teachers that we've been training needed a year at the university to look at their practice, reflect on it, and learn how to make improvements. And I felt that with the quality programme, it needs exactly the same. We need time to think about what we're doing, why we're doing it. Does it meet regulations? Does it not? If not, what do we have to do? So that's where the pathway to excellence has come in. So I hope that sort of gives you a clear idea. In terms of the international element, I was very lucky to work in Mauritius with the Early Childhood Authority there. and then with universities in China, and then again Saudi Arabia and here. And also I've been to Australia to sort of look at what they do. So it is great to see that we're all are doing the same thing, just in slightly different ways with slightly different requirements. And culturally, every country has to make their curriculum culturally compatible, because people don't just live where they were born anymore. Everybody moves. So it's culturally compatible as well. So in terms of sort of the international element, where you can see on here, endorsed by Childhood Education International, that is a 150 years old company based in America, and they're linked to the United Nations, and they have embraced ECRA and what it's trying to do. And they've monitored us, they've quality assured us. So I feel very proud to be able to say that they have endorsed what we're doing. And sitting behind that and ECRA are, you were talking earlier about ECRA's, the ECRA's statements. They're international rating scales. So they've been put together by an international team, very much like KHDA was launching this week. So we know that we're all working on this international platform now for the best for children. So that's the sort of international element. And I feel that because of that, and other countries inviting us in, it's given us this global recognition, I think. I've been fortunate to work with Arabian Child for 18 years, since they started, actually. So it's brilliant that they're doing what they're doing here in Dubai and the Middle East in terms of training. You know, Cash 2, Cash 3, Cash 5, all of the bespoke training, all of the extra things that will support any centre, whether it's Senko, whether it's learning through play, all of the work they're doing is adding to the quality of centres who buy into that. And it's not just about getting a certificate. It's about thinking, what training do my staff need and where can I find it? And sometimes you need something short. I'll just get somebody in, let's get everybody together and raise awareness and remind people. And I think that's what Arabian Child do so well. And I think that's certainly in our experience with working with Dr. Manal, that we've seen changes in many centres because of that step-by-step approach. And I think it's being honest. I don't know about you, but, you know, we can all think we're doing okay, but actually we know we can always just tweak it a little bit. And we don't want to get complacent. We want to be thinking every day, how could today have gone differently or better? But also saying, great, that was really good. And knowing when to pat ourselves on the back. So ECRA is, there's 80 standards under 6 domains. And I'll show you the comparison with KHDA in a little while, because they've got 5, and I believe ADEC's got 4 or 5. I'll check when I get to the slide. And then there are 5 tiers. So from step 1 right up to step 5. So again, that shows you the journey. So during this session, I'm going to tell you the process, but also what I'd like to share with you is some of my experiences of where I've seen quality evidence and what that looks like. Because I think that's what people usually ask me, how do we do it? And what are you looking for? So that's really what today's about. So is that okay as an introduction? Are you clear? And if you've got questions, please ask. And I know we've got people online, and we have somebody, thank you for joining us online as well. And we have the lovely Zainab here who's going to take questions from those online as well. Okay, so I've already explained about Arabian Child, but here in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Riyadh, and all across Saudi Arabia, whenever anybody engages in the ECRA process, that together we're doing coaching sessions. Together we're looking at each step of ECRA and giving an introduction. And then when it comes to the training side or the further development, Arabian Child take that on board, because ECRA needs to step back so that when we do the accreditation, you've worked on the improvement programme yourselves. Because I don't want to come in and tell you what to do and then come in and accredit you, because I don't think from an integrity perspective that would be quite right. So Arabian Child are that bridge between the two, if you like. So we really, really are looking all the time to enhance quality of care. Obviously, we know that. The picture of that classroom there, and some people have done this session with me and said, we can't do a classroom like that. That doesn't matter. Your classrooms are your classrooms, designed for your environment, your community, and your children. What I wanted to show in this picture is variation and range. So if a child needs to be quiet, there's an area for them to be quiet. If a child wants to go and pretend to be cooking and baking, there's somewhere they can go and do that. So that what we're looking at is meeting the child's needs throughout the day. So that picture is just an example of a well-resourced room. And I'm aware people have different size rooms. They have, some rooms are lighter than others. So you have to make that work for yourself. And when you're being accredited, we don't say you've got to do this or that. You tell us we're doing this way because this is what works for us and this is why. So it gives you the chance to showcase what you do the way you do it. And I think that's the difference between some programs where they say you've got to put these here and put those there and have 10 bricks, or we don't do that. You have to make those decisions, but they have to be made on knowledge and understanding that underpin early years requirements. So that's why the training comes in, because, you know, I've been to some centres and there's been some plastic bricks in a corner, but they weren't age appropriate. They were in the room of a 5-year-old. Well, a 5-year-old would look at those and think, what are those doing there? What do you know? But equally, a 5-year-old might be really creative and suddenly create them into something. So we have to think about everything and about the age appropriateness. The other thing about doing quality assurance is this community of trust. Communities are parents, really. We want them to trust us. When they first come and look at your centre, I'm sure you want them to feel that that child's going to feel at home and safe. Yeah, I think those are the two things that parents want. I met somebody on the plane flying over here, actually. And as you do, or as I always do, end up talking to somebody. And this man said, we've got a 14-month-old child. My wife's been looking at nurseries for him. And how do we choose them? I said, well, how did you feel when you looked? So he said, we went to one and she immediately felt at home and she felt that the child would be, you know, really well cared for. But her friend told her to go to a brand new, purpose-built, bright, shiny place. And, you know, she walked in, walked straight through, no security, nobody stopped her, nobody asked her any questions. And although it had some nice things, she didn't feel like she could leave her child because nobody greeted her. So to me, that's the difference of quality. It's not about the building. It's about how you feel. And I think early years has to be about that, doesn't it? They're our most precious being. So, oh, I didn't finish, did I? Sorry. So the other thing is the professional development, because again, having worked in different countries, I'm very aware that the training that supports early years varies hugely. And I think that's another reason why Arabian Child started originally in Dubai and then opened up across the Middle East, because without continuous professional development, without being aware of current research, even, you know, there's been so much work on 1001 days prior to when a baby's born. You know, the impact of the child in the womb before that, the impact of the grandparent has on the fetus. There's all this research, and then it tells us that once they're born, their senses of this, their brain is developing rapidly. So we have to know and understand our profession. And I think that's where professional development comes in, because it's no good you as leaders and managers and owners just knowing. We need the security man at the gate or woman to know how to talk kindly to a child. We need all of the care people to know when they're changing a diaper. I find it hard to say diaper. In England, we say nappies. But to talk to them when they're doing it. And we can't just assume people know. So therefore, professional development is critical to having a strong team with everybody trained at the level that they need to be trained at. But the more people know and understand about children and their development and their needs, the better the quality, but the better experience for the child. And then, of course, all of these programs for quality are just driving excellence. And it does meet the vision of Dubai, that are really raising awareness on early years. Otherwise, they wouldn't have launched that new quality framework. And having met Noor and Fatma and Hanan, I think it was, the other day, they really, really believe in it and they really want it to work. but it can't work without everybody else pulling together. And it will take time. Sorry, does anybody need the Arabic? No? Okay. So I don't really need to spend a lot of time saying why it matters, I think. But the international quality benchmarking does matter for many people because there's a lot of competition in early years. There's also a lot of children. So hopefully there's a centre for everybody. But I think if you're talking about marketing and your business, then if you've got a quality accreditation rating, parents are going to think, oh yeah, I'll go and have a look at that one, because they've really taken their time to understand what's needed. But we do need to educate parents as to why quality is important as well. So I think that's part of the process. And I think, it says on there about the competitive edge. But the other one that's important is about the enhanced child outcomes. And one of the reasons, I'm just going to focus on that for a minute, is that I've been doing some, really developmental work in some schools, actually in Saudi Arabia, not here. But what I discovered that when the children are starting at age 3, which I mentioned before, it's not, okay, is that all right? It's not, I think what I've found, let me put it this way, is that some of the education programs and the way the curriculum's delivered is limiting learning, not enhancing learning. And the reason for that is that the children are following a curriculum step by step. And what the teachers are not noticing is all the other learning that's taken on, what I call the hidden curriculum. So I watched a beautiful session the other day. Children were talking about animals. They've been doing all about the jungle. But then they were talking about carnivores. So they got some lovely vocabulary. And then the child said, that means you eat meat. And then another child said, we don't eat meat in our house. And somebody else said, oh, you're vegetarian. Now, that conversation told the teacher that they knew these words. They knew that the families ate different foods. If they'd just been following a book, that wouldn't have happened. And that conversation went on and on and on. So much learning evidenced by the children. And in China, I had a similar experience where I'd done a session on open-ended questioning and sitting and just being with the children, letting them play and playing with them, not leading the play. And this knowing when to join in and when to step back. And the teacher, she was a new teacher, she came up afterwards, she said, thank you so much for that session. She said, because I sat with the children and they told me all about the different tea and how to make it. She said, I'd have never known that. So when we talk about enhanced child's outcomes, we need to really think about how we're delivering our curriculum and how much time we're given to listening to what the children are saying to us whilst they're playing, and not just what we want them to learn. Because the vocabulary will happen, the language will happen, the interaction will happen, but we have to have that in such an interactive way. So when you're thinking about quality assurance, and they made that very clear in the KHDA about continuous provision, that's why. Because if we don't, we limit the learning and we limit those opportunities for us to observe the bigger picture and get to know the children fully. I feel like I'm probably telling you things you already know, but I'm sharing the examples because for me, after 40 years, I guess, doing this, yeah, my youngest son is 38, actually. So I've been doing this since he was born and teaching for 5 or 6 years before that in primary and secondary school. Just so you know, my actual teaching job when I first graduated was PE, physical education, and dance. So I was dance and music. So music with early years and physical things is
music.
Oh, absolutely not. I'm not as fit as I was. Okay, so these are the benefits that we've already spoken about, I think. But you want to have a good reputation, not just, again, in name only, but when your children leave your centres and go to school, I think it's wonderful when the school says, oh, that's great, they're coming from Hummingbirds or they're coming from Baby Zone, because they know that they're getting people who've got the children's early years to where it needs to be. So it's very good for the next stages.
It's also important even centres who are recruiting.
Yeah.
Even staff that are coming from certain nurseries. And, you know, I would very honestly say that this, if I see certain nurseries in a CV, I would not hire that person.
Yeah, because they moved and moved and moved, you mean?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
then I would, if there was a nursery that they were coming from,
Yes.
which has the quality and the accreditations, and I would feel like, you know, that's more of a value to my centre.
Definitely. And I think as well, when they apply for jobs at nurseries that they've heard good things about as well. So it works both ways. So that's really good point. Thank you. So I think you've got the credibility, you've got this whole benchmarking because you've used a quality programme. Okay. And then, like we've said already, continuous provision. So I'm just going to now, I thought we'd just do a little comparison, if you like, of the three different types. But I must just tell you about this little girl in the middle. She's called Zaina. And I was there the first day she started at a nursery in Riyadh. And she was like, I don't know, a limpet, you know, a limpet sticks to rocks. It's a shell that doesn't move. And she was stuck to her mum. And eventually her mum had said, look, I've got to finish my PhD. I've got work to do. I really need somewhere to leave her. Well, to begin with, she didn't settle at all. And she cried a lot, and her mum wanted her nanny there, and it was really tricky for the centre. But actually they then did what I'm sure you would all do. They sat down, they sat with mum, and then they came up with a plan. And it wasn't necessarily the basic settling in plan, because they'd moved from, I think they'd moved from Pakistan. So there was a lot of going on. So when I came back, she'd just settled beautifully. And they'd sent me videos in between. And I think it was because of the care taken to build those relationships. But also the child settling and moving through is at the centre of all of these accreditation processes. So on here, I've sort of got the Dubai Quality one, the KHD and ECRA. But those have got inspection wording. ECRA isn't an inspection. So we sort of sit outside that because you get inspected anyway. And that's why I like the idea of centres, if they want it, to have this external person. Sorry, my hair's sticking to my head. Can we do anything about the temperature? Is everybody else warm, or is it just me?
Yeah, just a good time.
Yeah, maybe we can do something about the aircon. So yeah, we've got the child at the centre, and we want to be able to work towards making changes so that you're ready for inspections, and we don't want to inspect directly. Okay, so I've taken this from, I loved this actually, this was from the Dubai Child, an active, capable, curious, happy and inquiring learner, growing in identity, language, culture, it's a very long sentence, and as a valued citizen, contributing to the rich tapestry of the UAE as a whole. Yeah, it is a very long sentence, not my sentence, but it's their statement. But if you think about that very first photograph I showed you of that room with all these opportunities, that sort of environment enables curiosity, enables inquiring, because the children can move around and find what they're interested in and then express themselves with you. And the culture, the cultural compatibility is essential in any country, like I said at the beginning. One of the nurseries I worked with in the UK, they had 45 different languages in the children that attended that nursery. And it was absolutely fantastic the way they handled it, you know, 45 different languages, and yet English was the common language. And those children left there having achieved and reached the milestones that they needed. So that was the first one that I took from the Dubai framework. And this one I've adapted again, because where I've written any child, they'd written the Dubai Child, but I've switched it to any, because any quality journey is the vision of and for any child. A global child living a local life, fully immersed in the rich culture, social and economic fabric of their own hometown or city. So I've adapted that. And I've used the photograph that I actually took in the car on the way to the KHD, on the way back from KHD, because of the, I just loved the sort of landscape, the views. But this is what children know and recognise every day. And when I was doing some training, this school improvement in August, I took photographs of Riyadh and put photographs all around the room, and the teachers hadn't considered previously to use the local landmarks for art and conversation and development. And it's such a small thing, but it can make such a big difference, giving children a sense of belonging and where they grow up, and that language opportunity to tell people what they know. And when I was in a nursery the other day, the children were actually drawing the Kingdom Tower. And I showed them a picture of my Kingdom Tower, but this little girl had coloured hers in. And she looked at mine and she said, no. And then she pointed at hers and she said, nighttime, because at nighttime it's all lit up. So she'd coloured it, whereas mine was a daytime shot. So it was just a great little exchange for me and a child. So again, when we're thinking of our quality assurance, quality accreditation, is our centre globally ready for this child? Another centre I visited, where's my little diamonds lady? Here. I think there was an AI room at the centre. And again, how do we use technology now with children? Because we don't want screen time all the time, we know. But we live in a technological world and their life is going to be that way. But I always worry that children won't know how to write anymore because everything's tap, tap, tap. You know, think about schools. So we have to think about that whole journey and the life that child's going to live in. And how do we allow those children to get both? And how do we work with the parents to understand the importance of both?
We have to keep a balance.
Absolute balance is the key. I don't know if any of you ever saw the movie Karate Kid, and he stands there like this, and Mr. Miyagi says balance is the key. And I've always remembered that in all of the learning that I've done and all of the teaching as well. So, oh, that's gone. Okay. So these were the 5 domains from the Dubai child: the learning and the curriculum, partnerships. I like this partnership, not just with parents, because we're having partnerships sort of all around, really. The health, the safeguarding, the well-being, and the leadership. So those are sort of core elements, as we know, of operating any business, any centre. Are you getting cold now? Yeah, okay, I should take mine off, really. So, and then the ADEC ones are so similar. These are a little bit smaller. So you've got student achievement, student development, teaching and assessment, curriculum. All of those things are sort of within their framework, and those are their areas used for inspection. So all of the same sorts of things that you would expect to see. And I think, you know, it says quality in the middle, and all of the things we've talked about: client satisfaction, increasing efficiency. Efficiency is an interesting word, but when you're staffing and you've got rotas and you've got to make the day work, that efficiency is important, isn't it? And then innovative solutions. I love that. I don't know how many times when I had my own centre, I went home at night thinking, how do I sort this out? How do I sort this out? And even when I got conflict between my teachers, I was trying to work out who started it. And I get, right, you're all coming into my office and we're going to sort this out now, because one was blaming the other. And I said, every time you do this, it impacts on the children. So, you know, these things, you know, I've lived and breathed what you're doing. So I really get it. And then, of course, the quality of what we're providing. And again, something that was said in the Dubai was about the provision and the impact. And I know we spent a lot of time analysing that, didn't we, Pretty? That we were sitting at the same table, so that was great. So let me move on to ECRA now. Is everybody okay? Does anybody want to say anything before I move on? Any questions or anything? No questions so far. You all happy so far? So I hope this has set the context for what we're doing. And what I'm going to talk to you now is about what these domains look like. And if you were to do the accreditation, what that would look like, okay? And there's no requirement for you to do it, but it's something that if you feel that's going to be useful and helpful, then, you know, we can talk further afterwards. So of course, number one is child learning and development, but straight away you can see that that probably links to number 5, the enabling environment, because the learning and development takes place in that environment. And we've already spoken about the environment a little bit already. Then number 2, that sounds like a lot. Child protection, it includes obviously safeguarding, but protecting them from anything and everything, whether it's becoming sick, from the health and safety element of the building, to even the safety of the toys and resources that you're using. You know, do we look at those? Do we throw them away when they're no good? Have we got a system of writing down when something's broken and putting it somewhere so that it gets repaired? Do we have a maintenance person that fixes things for us? And then the quality workforce goes back to what you were saying earlier. You know, how do we recruit? What are the criteria we want in our centre? And what are the steps we go through to make sure we employ the right people with the right credentials, or employ people that we know we can train, who are going to absorb our way, our methods and our ethos. Okay. And then you've got the community partnership. And this, again, isn't just with parents, but it is in the local community. Sometimes people go to parks, and sometimes I've seen people link with elderly care and take children in and do activities with the older people. So lots of different partnerships, but also partnerships with special needs. You know, perhaps you put parents in touch with somebody, a speech therapist for a child, or a child that maybe you decide is hard of hearing, and what can we do? So it's making those connections in the community as well. And then of course, number 6, the leadership. Without strong leadership, and without a leadership that understands the workforce, then the centre isn't necessarily going to be at its best. But also a leadership that allows teacher autonomy, you know, gives teachers a voice, find out what's right for your classroom. How do you want to manage that? Because not every age group's the same, we know. But even if you've got the same age group, you've got different personalities of teachers. So for example, when I was teaching primary school, I kept a guitar in the corner of my classroom. And if the children were getting a little bit chatty or not focused, or it was raining outside and they couldn't go out to play, I'd just get the guitar. I'd got a massive song sheet way before whiteboards and electronic. I'd written all the songs out, and the children would turn over the pages and we'd just stop and sing. And it just got everybody feeling happy again. And then we'd go back onto the lesson. So it's having that ability to not worry if, okay, we've got Arabic now, but just before we do Arabic, let's have a song, then let's do Arabic, because so you're sort of refocusing the children if they're getting unsettled. So this is how the domains break down. Now, again, I know when you went to KHDA, they started to show you the different components. I think these are a little bit more simple. So every area, every domain is broken down. And as you can see, very obvious things. The education. Now, the programme and the curriculum aren't necessarily the same thing. So you might be a Montessori setting, you might do high scope, you might do the curiosity approach. The educational, or EYFS, the educational programme is what your centre offers. The curriculum, in a way, is how you deliver that, how do you implement it, okay? Because we know that for early years, curriculum is more of a framework. You know, we want to cover the areas, the math, the language, the literacy, knowledge of the world, physical, fine motor skills, gross motor skills. So it's how that curriculum breaks down to cover all those areas of learning. And then the relationships and interactions, that's the peer relationships. How do we enable the children to play together and interact? How do we interact with the children? So it's broken down that way. And then the inclusive part, I know not all centres take children with severe special needs, but we all have children with different needs. And what we're looking at in the inclusivity is, you know, how do we cater for those? I had a little boy in my class at one of the schools who was very, very visually impaired. So he needed to sit right at the front when we were doing something. And he was happy with that, and he knew what he needed, and the other children knew what he needed. But being inclusive was important, that the other children understood. I worked with another little boy who very sadly had been in a very serious road accident. And I was his like homeschool liaison tutor. So I worked with him at home, and then I slowly integrated him back into school. but he'd lost a lot of his speech. So we found different ways for him to do the same lessons. And I think that's what we're looking at, inclusive. And he was amazing. He was amazing in the end. And he actually drew pictures of his accident. I mean, he couldn't remember his accident, but he drew a picture of a car and he turned it into looking like a monster. And then he used that to tell the other children to be more careful when they cross the road. So he turned his accident into something to share. And that was incredible considering the brain injury that he'd had. So, yeah, we have to be inclusive. And then this is how it breaks down again. So these are what the standards would look like. So number 12, positive staff-child interaction continually underpins practice. So if you were doing the ECRA accreditation, you would then evidence this. You would be able to tell us, how do you do it? So this is why I was saying, we don't tell you to do it. You, for your accreditation, say this is the method we use, or we do a few different ways. And when we come in and observe and assess, we can actually see it happening. But also there's an online portal, which I'll show you, where you can upload examples and rationale. Because to gain the accreditation, you tell us what you do, but why you do it as well. And that's what tells us the quality. It tells us your understanding, but it has to be a whole team approach. So the second one, peer interaction is encouraged and supported. Well, how is that? It should, hopefully through the environment, you've got this holistic time. I watched two children only the other day, just literally playing next to each other, and another child was talking out loud whilst he was doing things. And it was just lovely to see, because part of children's brain development is even talking to themselves whilst they're playing. And some people don't understand the importance of that. I've got a great niece. My nephew's got 2 little girls and a little boy. And the older one, she's 9 now. The other one's 7. I think he's 5. But she reads to him. But you can tell she does it like she's at school, because she'll hold the book and she'll say, well, what do you think that picture is? And it's great to see, but it shows that they've had that sort of learning themselves. And then the last one about behaviour. It's this positive approach to behaviour, isn't it? Positive, picking out when children are doing really well and acknowledging that, and sort of playing down some of the other stuff, unless, of course, it's dangerous when we have to step in. So these are just examples from that domain, okay? The next domain, again, I've not got examples of all of them, but I can show you the breakdown. So all of the things that you would expect to see there, how the child protection, what's our policy? How do we implement it, for example? Do we make sure every year that it's up to date? Because there might have been new regulations on how to report a disclosure of abuse, for example. You know, you'd have to evidence that new staff have a policy to make sure everybody knows what to do if they suspect abuse. And do you have a system where you sign to say that member of staff has seen that policy? So those are the sorts of details it goes into. But even under child protection and health and safety, sleeping, what's the sleep routine? Are the cots wide enough apart? You know, are there no blinds where there's you know, the pulleys hanging down that could go around a child's neck? Because in the UK, there's been children die in nurseries because the blinds of cords have been too close to where they're sleeping. Sounds terrible, but it's happened. So these are the details that we look for, that you have these policies in place. And of course, the health and well-being, how do we deal with emotions? I'm going to give you another beautiful example here. I was visiting a nursery in the UK who was also doing ECRA, and the child was crying, really upset. They were all outside in the garden, and I watched the teacher, and she just went over to the child and she crouched down. I'm not going to do that because of my knees. And she just said, what can I do to make you feel better? She didn't say stop crying or come here. She just stopped what she was doing and talked to the child. And that, for his well-being, was just what he needed at the time. And then she worked it out from there. Now, I know that might not work for all children, but it was a lovely example that I witnessed. And she was so gentle with him. So that was really lovely. And so this, again, is just a couple of examples of the questions. So healthy eating is promoted. I've seen that in many settings. Really healthy snack boxes come in from home. and the parents have actually been talked to by the centre, please don't send in sugary things, please don't send in, you know, sweets and biscuits. So, you know, what is your process? Excuse me for doing that. High standards of hygiene. And something I learned in Saudi, for example, is some of the centres, the children have a prayer when they go and wash their hands. So from an outside perspective, coming in to do accreditation, I now know of other things to look out for. And I really respect some of the way the cultural things are embedded. And in fact, the Arabian Child curriculum, they've created a new approach, and it's embedded some of these cultural things into it so that it is completely, we want to be transparent and culturally aware. And then the procedures for dealing with sickness. I mean, that's quite day to day, isn't it? If a child has an accident, who do they report it to? Who do they tell? Where is it written down? But we can't take it for granted that everybody does this. You know, we need to know that it's done and how it's done, and that it's part of your induction of new staff. Okay. Any questions so far? Clear? Okay, that's good. If you do have a question, don't be shy, you know. So then I'm just going to, I haven't got examples of standards for the rest of them, but these are the sorts of areas that we've broken down for the domain 4. But you can see in here, we've got citizenship. Now, citizenship, if I remember correctly, was one of the questions that we had at the KHDA day, wasn't it? We were trying to define what do we mean. And it was about the tolerance of the child understanding, even saving the planet, you know, throwing rubbish in a bin. How do we manage water, eco-friendly things? And that comes on to the sustainable environment. One of the nurseries, I know I keep giving you examples, so you have to excuse me, but I love to draw on having been in centres. The nursery I went into in Riyadh, she took a plant and instead of watering it every day, she didn't water it so that the children could see what happened by not watering. And that was an example of environmental stewardship, because instead of just telling them we need water, she showed them what happened without. And I just thought that was a very innovative activity. And then soon they would water it again and it would come back to life. But the children could see it every day and monitor it. And then the digital citizenship linked with what we were talking about earlier with AI, but also for the staff, because you need to be able to go online and find ideas. And so we use digitalization, but it's how do we do it? And again, you can evidence that. Indoor and outdoor environments, again, something I'm very aware of, that, you know, you've got such hot weather. So the way you use your environment has to be appropriate. It makes me laugh though, because in England, as soon as the weather gets hot, we're not allowed to send the children out without putting loads of sun cream on. The advert on television is slip, slap, slop. You know, and you put a hat on, you slip it on, and then honestly, we go through, I don't know how many tubes of sun cream in our nurseries, and the children have to put hats on. They don't all have the sails like you have here. But it is important. But also something I learned is if your children are outside in hot weather, how you manage the aircon, so they don't suddenly get really cold when they come in. So one of the centres I accredited turned the aircon off for a few minutes whilst the children get back in, and then gradually put it up again. Now that was a learning thing for me on my last visit in August, because obviously it was very hot in August. And then number 3, again, it's got the provision for special educational needs. If you do ECRA and you have no designated children with special needs, it doesn't mean we mark you down. It just becomes not applicable. So, and I had a lady in Canada message me about ECRA the other day, and she said, is it one size fits all? Because we do a balance of some formal teaching and learning through play. And I said, you know, you can deliver it how you want as long as it's appropriate for the children. So I think that's something I want people to realise, that we do it differently for different reasons. I mean, I visited a nursery in Canada a few years ago, and they brought in an American curriculum, which was very sort of structured in a way, but the way the nursery used it, they brought it to life. And in the afternoon, they sort of integrated the free play so that whatever they'd learned in the morning, the children could go and practice and experience in the afternoon. So they found a really good way to bring two different styles, if you like, together. Again, the eco-friendly practices, you know, what sort of activities do you do? And where's my lovely author gone? Yeah, so you've just written a book, haven't you, about using recyclable materials through play. And, you know, interestingly, though, I couldn't do that in China to begin with because the parents thought it was cheap, thought it was dirty. Why are you bringing things in that have been used? Why are you buying new toys? So we had to educate the parents into why using recycled materials. But in England, many years ago, they wouldn't let us use the egg boxes in case an egg had cracked. Sometimes the egg had cracked and spilt into the box. But that's because there'd been some sort of scare about eggs and people getting sick. So even with eco-friendly practices, we've got to be mindful that it's appropriate and clean. But I just took all these cardboard boxes into this nursery in China, and the children could crawl through, and the owner said, "Oh, you can't do that when the parents come in." So anyway, I left them there and explained why we were doing it. So that was okay. And then, of course, the leadership. So how does that break down? Operations, we know. The systems for enrolment, HR management. You know, how do we keep a track of who's the applications? It might sound very obvious, but if you haven't got somebody efficient doing this side of it, it can get very confusing. And somebody could say, well, you haven't trained me. If there's an accident, I had this at a centre, a lady picked up a child by just one arm, and it was like, and she said, well, nobody told me different. Well, my heart was thinking, well, you should have known different, but the nursery hadn't formally shown them, pick them up with two hands. And I saw another child wake up from sleep, went to see the teacher, and the teacher, I thought she was going to be so sweet, and she just swung the child round and plonked her on a chair. And I went straight to the management and said, I have to report what I've just seen. Because as a visitor, I didn't chastise the teacher. It wasn't my position. If she'd have been doing something really terrible, I'd have stepped in, but I saw it through a window and I went and reported it, and then they put their process in.
And that's where professional development comes in.
Exactly.
Your time and your investment in your members of staff. Before you actually put those people in that room, you should know their ability of safety.
Exactly. And you just can't assume, because you'd think if you're working with young children, you know young children, but also you've got staff coming from different places, different countries. And something else I learned was their methods of behaviour management were very, very different. And also some young people coming in use that behaviour management the way they've been treated, which doesn't necessarily fit with what we want from an emotional security and well-being perspective. So again, it's just you get the opportunity to review the standards under these elements and look at how you're doing it. But also you have to be really honest and think, actually, we've got a few gaps. What do we need to do now? I'll show you the next stage in a second. So when you embark on ECRA, as you can see, it's a journey starting right at the beginning, moving up through to meeting the standards, hopefully, and hopefully then to exceeding. That's the journey, okay? I don't need to sort of go into any more detail about that, but that is that tiered approach. When you get assessed, you only get a rating based on the lowest of your tiers. So if you've got 5-star, if you like, on, I don't know, let me just think, your safeguarding module, which hopefully you would have the domain, but you're lower in the teaching and learning, you'd get the rating of the lowest one because it's a block system. So you don't get a 5 in one and a 4 in another. So that's why, so this is how you get to these star ratings. So as you can see, we're looking for exceptional quality for 5-star, but to be honest, 4-star is brilliant because it means that you've got a few recommendations, but you're still exceeding what the legal requirements are. And I think that's what we're looking for, because 3 is evidence of quality. You're doing what you have to be doing. And then when 2 and 1 is where you're not even reaching the sort of legislation that you're supposed to be. And I know everybody wants 5, but it's a bit like with hotels. In a hotel, apparently you've got to have a swimming pool to get 5-star. Well, you don't have to have a swimming pool to get 5-star in early years, I'll tell you now. But that we don't have anything that you have to have or haven't to have to get 5-star, because we don't want to sort of make it impossible for anybody. But it is about how you do it, how you demonstrate it, and how you show the determination. So one of the centres I've done an assessment on this time, they have got 5-star. They don't know it yet, but they have. But there was just one area that just she knew what she was doing. She'd done the training, and on the day it wasn't quite what it was needed to be. But I wouldn't stop her getting 5-star because she had a plan in place for that room. And I think that's what's important. Not that you could do that for every domain, but and actually she sent me pictures afterwards, and she'd made the changes instantly and had a meeting with the team and redeveloped that room at the end of that day. But also, if you get to that point and you need another 2 or 3 weeks or a couple of months where there's only one area that's not quite there, we give that time, because with ECRA, we want the excellence for the children. It's not a test. It's not an inspection. We want you to actually be there. And that was the same when we were doing the early years teacher training for the status. They had chance to build up their evidence during university during that year. Most of them had to have a degree to do this qualification. It was the status on top. But they had the time to build up, to change their classrooms, to show us what they were doing. So it was only a teacher approach, but this is a whole centre approach. Okay, so the impact that it's had has been phenomenal, really. I've spoken to several people and I've actually created an impact report. But one is that the teachers are more engaged because, like you've just said, you've done the professional development. You've made the teachers feel that they're important and that what they do is important. And that's the nannies, the caregivers as well. So that's made a big difference. But the children's outcomes that they were achieving and their awareness of children's learning, their observations and assessments were so much better, so that parents could see that the children weren't just meeting the curriculum, but wow, look at what else my child knows and can do. So these, and another lady she was a principal of a big centre. She said they went from all working independently to working as a team, and that everybody felt that the value was part of their responsibility. And if you've got a team like that, you become a family and everybody's working to the same ends. So those are just some of the sort of examples, if you like, of how it's increased. So now, how do you do it? How do we get there? What are the steps? It's very, very straightforward, actually. So first one, you apply, and if you want to do it, we'll talk to you about how you do that later. But the next thing is the self-assessment. And this is the part that I think will help centres with KHDA, ADEC, any of those, because we have developed a self-assessment toolkit that you would be able to buy, if you like. And I'll have to get Manal in here later to talk about costs and money. But by doing the self-assessment, you start yourself on the quality improvement journey. And you can use this against the ECRA indicators, but also you can apply it to the KHDA ones. So that's the beauty of it. It's a toolkit which teaches you and your team how to reflect, because that's another area that I've felt is missing. And I think we need to do a lot more in teaching individual teachers how to think about themselves without thinking it's personal. That's the problem. If you say, what can you do better? They might say, well, I thought I'm doing okay. And then they take it personally and think, oh, don't you think I'm any good? But that's not what we want them to do. We want them to step back, step outside and learn to look and critically analyse, if you like, what they're doing. So this is what the self-assessment toolkit looks like. And again, it's very, very simple. Can you see that okay? I'm just going to move to nearer the screen just so I can point. So it's not quite the same as the standards. That we've sort of trimmed down the standards into indicators. But what you and the team can do is, do we always do it? Okay, tick. Do we sometimes do it? Question mark, maybe. or do we never do it? Now, never isn't a problem if it's not relevant to your centre. Like I said, if you don't have children with very specific needs, or it just might not be relevant. Most things will be. So that's not a problem. I don't want people to think if they never do it, it's an issue. But if you never do it and you should be doing it, then it becomes a problem. Okay. Now, this part, and we give you this electronically. I actually think I've got the book with me, but I forgot to get it out. So this is just trying to help the reflection process. So when we're looking at evaluating it, is it a who? Is it something that somebody needs to do or has done? Is it a what? What is it that we need to do? Is it a thing, you know, is it their environment? Is it that corner there? It could be anything. Where is it? Is it in a classroom? Is it outside? Is it in the policy? Is it in the office? So, and then when? When does this happen? Or when should it happen? And how? What is the process we're using here? Or should we? And why? So these are just indicator words to help people self-evaluate. And then in the boxes, it's just there for notes. Okay, so that is just the first step. And I think just using those words help us to reflect who, what, why, where, when, and how. What happens next is that you then create an action plan. But the way this has worked, and again, just to give the example of the lady who just got a 5, she had an inset day for her whole team about ECRA. She got them all together. She talked to them about the process. When we've got a book with all the standards in, I say this is just the first step, but the book with the standards in show what we're looking for and what we're not looking for. And she went through and did that as an exercise with her team. So she took the responsibility to really develop it. And that's why she got a 5. In fact, not just why, but because it really incorporated the best example of quality as a leader, as well as then what she did with her team. So once you've done that initial thing, you then start to put an action plan together. And that's just a very short example taken from that particular centre, because it was one of the most comprehensive and simple action plans I've ever seen in all my years of teaching. I was so impressed with it that I've used it as an example. So let me show you the actual example here. So if you can see at the top, so the key findings, okay, the staff are qualified, but CPD is irregular. Peer observations and reflective practice need strengthening. And some staff feel overwhelmed during peak times. That was a very, very honest evaluation, okay? But also she asked the support staff, how has it been for you? I want you to feed into this self-assessment. And they said, inconsistent professional tone and conduct has been observed among the staff. So the support staff had realised that they weren't always very kind to each other. Yeah, it was a very nice way of putting it. And then the second one, mobile phones were being used during working hours. That shouldn't have been happening, okay? And then non-English communication was impacting on the consistency. So I just think it's fantastic that these support staff were honest enough, and she gave them the confidence to give this feedback so that they could make the changes. So this is just one example. So her objective was then to enhance professional development, create a calendar on the staff needs, organise peer observation schedules with time for feedback, and then lastly, share best practice through staff-led mini workshops. And who was going to do it? It was the curriculum coordinator, and the timeline was ongoing. So I just thought that was so clear, and she did that for each domain. So after that, that's when she did the extra training, and she put it all. She's now got all her team doing Cash 2, Cash 3, and 3 of the leaders are doing Cash 5. So that is somebody who really takes responsibility for wanting to improve quality. So I was really happy with that, and it made my life easier because I could use it as an example. So after that, so once you've done the self-assessment, that's when you start building the evidence, uploading photos, documents. And we do say, I don't want just a blank document. So if it's an accident form, we need to see it, but you can hide the children's names, you know, think of confidentiality. So it gives us an idea. usually what I would say is when you upload evidence, if I'm going to see it in the centre when I do the assessment, it doesn't need to be uploaded really. I don't want to give people so much work that they have got no time to live and breathe whilst they're doing this. But you have got a year from when you apply to when you finish. So it's a slowly thing. So then you'll have the assessment, and the assessment comprises of, depending on how big your centre is, 2 or 3 hours of coming in, observing every classroom. And I know some accreditation organisations only do 50%, but we're looking at every. I can't see the point of doing it if I don't see every room. Your babies, your toddlers, your preschool, you know, KG, whatever. And you schedule it to showcase the best time of what's happening. Yeah. And then obviously we give you the outcome, which is a very detailed report that covers the domains. And then obviously after that you get the report, you get your certificate, and then it's just a matter of ongoing continuous quality improvement. And the accreditation lasts 3 years.
Sorry.
Bless you.
Is it, you know, somewhere far?
Yeah. No, that's okay. Accreditation lasts for 3 years. So at the end of each year, we would just ask you to submit a quick summary report of how that year's gone. But also it's about what are the priorities for the next year. So I think it's things that you probably already do, but it just means you can retain that star rating. And also from a cost perspective, if you think I'm paying this much now, but actually that's over 3 years, so it's a bargain. That's what I would say. And then this is what I know it's very tiny, but that's the online portal that you would get. So what you're able to see is we have all of the standards online. There's a little button here, whereas if you've want to send me a note or the assessor a note, you can click on that. And then you upload files, and then you put your description on there. And then if one piece of evidence links to several standards, you can write it there. So you don't have to do it over and over again. You're just able to upload one time, because again, I've been a nursery owner, I've been a manager, I've worked with nurses. I know your time is precious. This is important, but if we can make it easier for you, then that's what we want to do. What I didn't say right at the beginning is when you start the process, it's really helpful. We'll have an online meeting. We can do another orientation if you want other people to hear this. But we do a coaching session for the self-assessment for your quality team or your leadership team. We do another coaching session to introduce the main body of the standards, and then we do another one to introduce the portal. So all the way through you get that. If you need additional help, that's where Arabia Child comes in. They'll put on extra training or get you on the cash courses, or just arrange to do some short webinars with Michelle, our training manager. So all of those things are in place. But at the first start, although I can't come to every centre, to do a virtual walk round with you is really helpful, because I see where you've started and then obviously see it at the end. And the lovely thing as well is that we can do the assessments virtually, because I tend to come over usually February, May and November. I won't be coming back now till next May. I'm going to tell them my news because my daughter's having twins. Thank you. That's in January. So I will be working, but I'll be working from the UK for at least the first few months to be with her, and then I'll be helping her afterwards. But at least I'm hoping by May I can travel again. ECRA Granny, yes. That's true. So anyway, so that's the way it works, but we can do it virtually, and it has been successful as long as you promise to show all areas virtually as well. And you have to get permission, I know, because there's children in them, but we don't, anything you put online is secure. It doesn't go out or beyond. And even the examples I've used from that nursery, I got permission for. So I don't use anything that I haven't been allowed to use. And I think that's really important as well. So I just want to give you a little bit of example about evidence, because evidence can. Sorry? Do we want to break? Yes, I know I'm the full flow. So I'm nearly finished. Do you want me to carry on, or would you like a break? You will carry on. Thank you. We're nearly there. And then we've got more time to chat at the end, I think. So this is just what I was looking for is how the sort of different activities are set out across the rooms, and the teachers knowing and understanding what the children are learning and why they're using the resources they're using. So this was just a very simple example of choosing from the table the letters and then going to a big mat on the floor to place them where they belong. But then moving on to doing and drawing letters in another place. Now, it looks simple, but what I loved was the children were moving around. They weren't sitting all of the time. They were learning their letters in a lovely, creative way. I went to some other centres and every lesson was based on the carpet. And many years ago, I attended a session and we were all asked, are your children prisoners of the carpet? And we don't want children to be sat down all day. They move, they need to move. So learning and moving is all part of that age group. So that was just one simple example. Another lovely example, the children were using pincers to just move like pine cones and different natural materials. And I walked over to where they were doing this. There was a support teacher there. And I didn't have to ask her. She said to me, oh, we're doing this exercise. It's part of this theme, but this is helping their fine motor skills. So she told me what the learning intentions were. And that's a question I always ask when I go in the room. What are the learning intentions? What are the main intentions, but what else is happening? And I really want them to be able to say, well, we're focusing on language, or we're focusing on this group are doing the concept of big and small. And I want to be able to see that, but I need to know that the teachers know why they're doing it. And this has come from going into a room many years ago, and there was a student teacher in the room, and she had a little group of children, and they were painting like on a table like this, just green, 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 green. And that's fine. And I said, oh, what are you doing? You know, what's happening here? And she said, I don't know. I've just been told to stand here and let the children paint green. So it turns out they were painting for a Chinese dragon because it was going to be Chinese New Year. But wouldn't it have been a great idea if the student was told the plan so that she could then engage with the children, maybe put pictures of dragons in the area? So, yeah, so it's really important that people understand. Now, I'm just going to click this. I don't know what your first thought was, but oh, just realised I've lost an earring. I don't know whether it's here or back at this hotel, never mind. I looked at this activity. At first I went, superheroes. And I know a lot of people, particularly in the UK, they don't like people to use Disney or these things. However, we know that children love them and are interested in them. And my son, he was so into Thomas the Tank growing up, him and some other children. So in order to get them to the writing table, I put Thomas the Tank rulers and pencils and rubbers on that table so they would do it. So what I was so happy about with this, because I just saw the children with all these rubber bands around there, and they were saying it's another fine motor skill activity, wanted the children to peel the bands off, and it's really difficult. So I thought, wow, they had to really use their strength. And also the superheroes were people who help us, doctors, firemen. And I thought, wow. So, you know, we have to be so careful to not judge until we know why people are calling something that, because I thought they were going to be learning about Batman and all of those, but no, it was all about us. But what a great way to say to children, these are the real superheroes. These are the people to aspire to. And they, when I went back, they had a vet set up outside, and there was somebody sitting there as the vet at a table checking them in. He was the reception, asking them what was wrong with their pet, and they were carrying their pets in. It was fabulous activity, but they knew that this person was going to help make their pet better, hopefully. So yeah. So yes, the final part of this is the reaccreditation, which I've already said about. So I'm not going to do any more about that just now, but the timeline is sort of, we say 5 to 8 months. And I'm actually going to create a new calendar so I can see where everybody's at. But it just means that when you start with the self-assessment, and then you need to decide how long is that process going to take me? When am I going to be ready? When am I going to be ready to actually have the final assessment? And I'm just waiting for Manal to come in because it's just the right time. Perfect timing, Dr. Manal. Just needed you in here just now. So we although we've got a year from once you've applied, that's when, you know, if we get to 8 months, you have your assessment, but you might need another couple of months to put something right. So that's why we sort of allow it this way. And what do you get? You get a whole, well, not too many things. You get the self-assessment toolkit. I'll get it out of my bag in a minute. You get a standards pack. So it's just a pack, a simple pack, not quite as detailed as KHDA's pages and pages, but it's got the standards, it's got what we're looking for, and it's got how to use it and how to upload, all of those things. And then again, we give you the links to Arabian Child, which you've already got, all of you. And then, as I said before, we do the coaching sessions, myself and Dr. Manal, to get you through the process. And really, that's it. So thank you so much for listening.